Hi there, my name is Rai Nazar Hayat, and you are hearing my podcast by the name of RNH Spotlight. This is regarding Bagram Airport and President Trump's threat to Taliban to vacate it and hand it over to the American authorities. The world has become accustomed to the unexpected and the audacious in the international politics, yet the recent pronouncements by President Donald Trump regarding Bagram Airport has sent a ripple of astonishment across diplomatic and strategic circles. His blunt demand for the Taliban to hand over Bagram Airbase to America or face bad consequences is a stark and provocative challenge to the existing post-withdrawal order in Afghanistan. This is not mere political bravado. It is a calculated statement that re-injects American military ambition into a landscape long considered abandoned, a move that demands a deep analysis of its historical roots, its contemporary implications, and its potential future trajectories. It signifies a shift from a policy of disengagement to one of renewed, albeit limited intervention predicated on the new geopolitical realities of 21st century. To truly grasp the weight of this statement, we must first understand the symbolism of Bagram itself. For 2 decades, it was the nerve center of the United States military presence in Afghanistan, a sprawling complex that housed tens of thousands of troops and air force and a detention facility. Its abrupt and its, in the eyes of many, humiliating abandonment in July 2021 was a powerful visual metaphor for the end of the American war. It was a clear signal to the world that the U.S. chapter in Afghanistan has closed, leaving the country to its own devices. This sudden return to the Bagram question is a direct consequence of the great power competition that now defines international relations. While the US and its allies were mired in a seemingly endless counterinsurgency, other powers were watching and waiting. China and Russia in particular saw the American quagmire as an opportunity to expand their influence in a strategical, vital region. The US withdrawal, far from creating a stable, neutral buffer state, has created a vacuum that these powers are now eager to fill. Trump's focus, therefore, is not on Taliban or on the internal affairs of Afghanistan per se, but on the larger chessboard of global power. He has framed the issue not in terms of counterterrorism or nation building, but in terms of countering Chinese influence. The argument he has repeatedly articulated is that Bagram's proximity to China's nuclear facilities makes it an indispensable asset for American intelligence and a strategic positioning. This perspective reconstructualizes the entire Afghan conflict, moving it from a war on terror to a front in the new Cold War. This shift in framing is a crucial attempt of the Trump foreign policy doctrine. It discards the liberal internationalist principles of past administrations in favor of a purely transactional and realist approach. The value of Bagram is no longer measured in terms of its ability to fight the Taliban or to build a democratic government, but in its utility as a strategic check on its rival power. This approach, while shocking to traditional foreign policy and this establishments, is a direct appeal to the domestic audience weary of nation building and endless wars, promising a more efficient and self-interested use of American power. The U.S. intervention in Afghanistan beginning in October 2001 was a direct response to the horrific 9/11 terrorist attacks orchestrated by Al-Qaeda from its sanctuaries within Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. The initial goal was clear and seemingly achievable: dismantle Al-Qaeda, capture or kill Osama bin Laden, topple the Taliban regime that harbored them. This early phase was swift military success. The Taliban collapsed, Al-Qaeda scattered, and a new US-backed government took power. However, the mission soon suffered from a lack of strategic clarity and a fatal case of mission creep. The focus shifted from counterterrorism to a more expensive and ultimately hubristic project of nation building. The US and its allies poured billions of dollars into a country with a fragile social fabric, deep tribal divisions, and a history of resisting foreign occupation. The attempt to impose a Western-style democratic government and a modern army on a society ill-equipped to absorb them was, in retrospect, a fundamental miscalculation. The reasons for the failure are manifold. First, the US became distracted by the invasion of Iraq in 2003, diverting crucial resources and attention away from Afghanistan, just as the Taliban were beginning to regroup. Second, the reliance on a succession of corrupt and ineffective Afghan governments eroded public trust and created fertile ground for the Taliban's resurgence. Third, the U.S. military reliance on a large-scale combat operations, often resulting in civilian casualties, alienated the very population sought to win over. The Hearts and Minds campaign was a strategic failure. Fourth, and perhaps most critically, the sanctuaries for the Taliban and other militant groups in neighboring Afghanistan and Pakistan border were never effectively neutralized. This cross-border support provided the insurgency with a constant supply of fighters, weapons, and safe haven to plan attacks. The Doha Agreement, signed in February 2020, became between Trump administration and the Taliban, was a formal acknowledgement of this strategic statement. It set the stage for a complete U.S. withdrawal, which was later executed by President Joe Biden in August 2021. The chaotic and precipitous nature of the final withdrawal, including the abrupt abandonment of Bagram Airport, a retreat, leaving the very regime it had sought to topple in first control, it took full control once more. The legacy is a tragic paradox. A war fought to prevent the return to the pre-9/11 status quo ended up producing precisely that outcome, albeit with a new set of challenges and players. Today, Taliban's Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan stands as a de facto government, though it remains largely unrecognized by the international community. The regime has imposed draconian restrictions on women's rights, media, and civil liberties, drawing widespread condemnation. Economically, the country is in a state of crisis, exacerbated by the freezing of Afghan state assets by the US and other nations. The Taliban's grip on power is, for time being, unchallenged by any significant armed opposition. However, they face a new threat from the Islamic State Khorasan province, ISISK, a rival group that considers the Taliban too moderate and has launched a series of deadly attacks. The internal rivalry adds another layer of instability to an already volatile country. On the international stage, Afghanistan is no longer a central focus of Western policy. However, it is far from being a forgotten nation. Regional powers like China, Russia, Pakistan, and Iran are actively seeking to fill the vacuum left by US withdrawal. China, in particular, is exploring economic and strategic opportunities, particularly in Afghanistan's vital mineral resources, and views the country as a keynote in Belt and Road Initiative. The Taliban, desperate for foreign investment and legitimacy, have been cautiously receptive to these overtures. It is against this background that the Trump's threat to retake Bagram must be viewed. Bagram is not a former U.S. military base. It is a potent symbol of American power and a strategic asset of immense geopolitical value. Its location, a short flight from the border with China and Central Asia, makes it a perfect hub for intelligence gathering and power projection. This is core of Trump's argument. Bagram's value is no longer about Afghanistan itself, but about the United States' great power competition with China. The future of Bagram and the US-Taliban relationship is fraught with peril and uncertainty. Trump's threat, delivered with a mix of bluster and ambiguity, raises several critical questions. First, what are the bad consequences he alludes to? This could range from simple escalation of sanctions and financial isolation to something far more sinister, such as targeted airstrikes or a covert operation to reclaim the base. The Taliban, for their part, have been quick to reject any notion of a renewed US military presence, citing Doha Agreement commitment to Afghanistan's sovereignty. They have their own domestic audience to consider and cannot be seen as capitulating to a foreign power, especially one they defeated, supposedly. So, second, what is the strategic calculus behind this move? The most obvious reason, as stated by Trump, is to re-establish a foothold for a regional counterbalance to China. A military presence at Bagram would allow the US to monitor China's activities in the region, including its military and economic expansion. It could also serve as a base for counterterrorism operations against ISISK and other groups, a goal that will align with the Taliban's own interests. However, such a move would be massive reversal of policy and could be seen as a violation of the very agreement the US signed. It would also certainly be condemned by Russia and China. That could even alienate regional partners who have grown wary of US military intervention. Third, what are the potential outcomes? The potential outcome is worst case scenario would be a new conflict where the Taliban, backed by regional actors, resist any US attempt to reoccupy the base. This could spiral into a new, smaller scale proxy war, underlying any hope of stability in the region. A more diplomatic outcome could involve the US offering in the Taliban a carrot in exchange for the stick of threat. This could include the release of frozen assets, international relations, recognition, and even limited economic assistance. Such a deal would be politically controversial in the US and would legitimize a regime that has a dismal human rights record. Beyond these immediate considerations, the threat to retake Bagram raises fundamental questions about the nature of US policy in a multipolar world. It demonstrates a willingness to discard previous diplomatic agreements and use coercive diplomacy in international law and norms that US has historically championed. It signals to other nations that American commitments are conditional and can be reversed at a moment's notice, potentially encouraging more confrontational, less predictable global environment. All in all, it seems that the region of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and this whole area is in for strange times. These strange times can lead to unintended consequences and a different route to international relations. Let's see what happens. My name is Rai Nazar Hayat, and you were hearing my podcast by the name of RNH Spotlight. Goodbye.